Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today is the day that I want to talk about Vengeance is Mine, All Others Pay Cash by Eka Kurniawan. And yeah, this is going to be a video where I'm going to rave about this book. I gave this one 5 stars. So yeah, it goes without saying, I love this book. And with this, that means I have read all of his translated novels. I think he has some translated short stories as well. And if I'm not mistaken, he probably has some untranslated works, but I might be mistaken. But in any case, I have read three of his novels so far. This one is definitely up there alongside Beauty is a Wound. Man Tiger is also kind of nice, but you know, I really like his writing, and so I have high expectations. So a nice book like Man Tiger is kind of like to me. But yeah, this one is definitely like up there, slightly below Beauty is a Wound, but still really, really wonderful. And Vengeance is Mine, All Others Pay Cash was also translated by Annie Tucker, who also did Beauty is a Wound. So there's that. Anyway, why do I love this book? First of all, there's that premise, which is really ridiculous. Or at least I think it's kind of ridiculous. It's about this young man named Ajukawer, who has some issues with getting erection. Basically, something traumatizing happens in his life, and after that event, he cannot get an erection. Now, this book is going to deal with that. It's going to deal with his, the internal conflicts that he has regarding his inability to get an erection, and his worry about other people knowing about his condition. And it sort of makes sense when you consider that this novel is set in a setting where masculinity is something that is really valued. And so Ajukawe, being a young man himself, he sort of finds himself in a situation where he has to act in a way that conforms to the traditional way of presenting masculinity. He has to act out the performative aspects of masculinity in his where he lives, and that is somewhere in rural Indonesia. And this setting is going to be like a really interesting point that I want to get to right after this. But yeah, the premise itself is about a young man who can't get an erection, and his best friend also knows about this, and his best friend is kind of like trying to help him figure out how he can get erection. But this being a nice novel with a nice character development, with nice plot development, we are going to see how that whole thing about erectile dysfunction, the whole thing about his penis is, how everything is going to unfold, what kind of revelation that we are going to get as far as, the protagonist's conflict goes. And I think it's really interesting the way that, the direction that this novel takes. Now, one of the themes that is really important in this book, which I really enjoy seeing, because I get this really big sense of catharsis, due to this theme being tackled in this novel, is toxic masculinity. Now, where I live, a lot of people tend to dismiss this phrase, toxic masculinity, because a lot of them like to sort of dismiss it as some kind of Americanism or Westernism or whatever. You know, anything that comes from the West. And so it, you know, that as a concept just sort of gets diminished, when in fact the problem associated with that in this particular region of the world is still very much tangible, and the effect is pretty much really it's obvious, and it can be devastating to the society. So I really enjoy seeing any work that tackles that theme, that spits on its face, you know. And this is a book that definitely spits on toxic masculinity, using this a penis as a symbol of masculinity, you know, something to represent how a masculine person should be. You know, the way that this penis is kind of formed into that shape in this novel is really interesting. And eventually, you know, something that happens later in this novel, the main character, he's going to fall in love with a woman, but it is, you know, related to this. His conflict will eventually bleed over to that relationship because of his own worry about his performance. So yeah, just now I mentioned something about the setting and also toxic masculinity. The setting of this place, I find it's really it's in a way, it's quite one-dimensional. The setting is one-dimensional. Characters are great, but the setting is one-dimensional, which is not necessarily a bad thing. By one-dimensional, I mean the setting is really utilized in a way that it can really highlight the problem with toxic masculinity. So basically, the author uses the setting to just pretty much show you, you know, hits you in the face that in this place, toxic masculinity is king. So you get this impression that this particular village where Ajukawe and his best friend and his family live has this kind of like Wild West vibe, certain kind of lawlessness to it, where a lot of people just sort of get into fights, a lot of people gets into duels, and all of these things, people around them, you know, the bystanders just sort of see these things happening and they just act casually around it, as if it is something that is quite normal to happen in this place. So it feels kind of outlandish in the sense that how can a place be so lawless with so much corruption going on? You know, corruption is also something explored in the book, especially corruption in relation to the police, you know, people in positions of authority. How can so much corruption be happening in this place? Now, obviously, we know that this kind of lawlessness does exist in various places in the world, but the way that this particular place is presented in this book is that it really accentuates the problem related to this adherence to toxic masculinity by the society. and it ties really well with the personal conflict of the main character, and because of that, it ties really well to this entire story. So basically, the different elements of this novel just pretty much just fits with each other really snugly. They all like hug each other happily in this book. And so you have this sense of coherence in the tone of this book and the writing of this book. The tone takes on something that is outlandish. It has this sort of dark comedy vibe where the writing tries to portray almost everything in this kind of like detached and blasé manner, without assigning much of its own feelings to it. Like the narrator is not very impassioned about anything that happens in the story. Like the narrator is just there to narrate the story in a way that feels almost absurd, like it doesn't really care so much about assigning any kind of emotional weight or any kind of meaning to any event in this book. Like everything that happens here is just something that happens to the characters. So you don't feel like, at least from the narrators, the narrative style, you don't feel like you're being influenced emotionally, but you could probably, of course, get influenced by the characters in this book, the plot itself, the story. But the narration style is definitely something that feels very neutral also. But I think it is also because of that neutrality in the tone that sort of makes it, it allows more for a deadpan delivery of humor, which is definitely the brand of humor that I really enjoy. So that was also another reason why I really enjoyed this book. So also in the tone of this book, it has some kind of crudeness to it, which can be quite jarring to some people. It can be quite triggering for other readers as well, because there are certain scenes in this book that are written in a way that is quite graphic, especially scenes relating to physical fights, sexual assault, death, violence. None of these, I personally think, none of these feel very gratuitous in this book. They all contribute to the same point. So that's the part I really appreciate. But it is also the crudeness that also kind of makes it aligns really well with the point that the story is trying to make, which is to show in a very ridiculous way, using this really ridiculous plot line, show how toxic masculinity is bad. Most of the characters in this book, they are male characters, so you aren't going to see a lot of female characters. There are some important female supporting characters in this book. I would say that they are written well. Many bad things happen to female characters in this book, just like in Beauty is a Wound. But I wouldn't say that those aspects are gratuitous either. And in fact, whenever something bad happens to a female character, it is usually to show the kind of like, it is usually used to critique the shortcomings of the male characters. And I really like that, because it feels true, and at the same time I don't feel that the female characters in this book are sort of downgraded in any way, but rather it is the male characters, or rather their foolishness, that are kind of being mocked in the story. So that part is also quite nice. Anyway, I think that's all I'm going to say about this book so far. It's a really wonderful book, so if you have the chance to get this book, if you are interested, feel free to do that. If you have read this book, let me know what you think about it. If you have read any of his other books, let me know what you think about it. If you have any other thoughts, let me know what you think about it. Let me know what you think about it. Anyway, yeah, I'll see you again in a different video. So until then, take care. Thanks for watching, and bye bye.